اللهم صل على محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأجساد وشفائها ونور الأبصار وجلائها وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم.
Then you wage war on Dajjal's behalf. You're waging the war for him and you don't even know. And you're going to liberate Libya. And we have some from Libya here today. And when you liberate Libya and you're beating the drums, you fool. And my language is deliberately harsh. You fool. What you have done is given Libya to NATO. And NATO now controls Libya because of you fool. And that's the softest language I can find for them. And they're doing the same thing in Syria. And you will announce that he is killing his own people. The Syrian government is killing its own people. Oh, I see. Wonderful statement, Mr. President. But have you been sleeping, Mr. President? Has it been a very sound sleep? Are you not aware that this country and that country and that country, which are allies of the Zionists, are training and arming and financing armed men to enter into Syria, to wage bloody insurrection and to commit atrocious acts of terrorism? Are you not aware of that? And what is the government supposed to do? Put a red carpet to welcome them? And when the government intends to defend itself against armed insurrection, foreign armed insurrection, Mr. President, are you going to condemn that government? I hope the same thing happens to your country one day. If you don't have the know, you would not know, for example, that a loan from the IMF at 1.5% interest is still riba. So you will send to Al-Azhar University for a fatwa. They have eyes and yet do not see. This is how important is this methodology. Islam to Iman to Ihsan. And then in question we'll find what are the signs of the last day. And two are given. One is that you'll find the naked barefooted shepherds competing with each other in the construction of high-rise buildings. That's easy to see. That's plain as clear. That's all there in the open. You don't even need spectacles for that. Okay? What's the second one? And tell you that Anakarum, that the slave woman will give birth to her mistress. Two different signs. Not by accident. These two different signs are given to teach us about methodology. That there are some signs of Akhirul Zaman which are plain and clear. And there are other signs of Akhirul Zaman which have to be interpreted. And you need a methodology of interpretation. This is the best way to begin the subject, to introduce your audience, provided of course that you get the skill of a storyteller. So that's the hadith with which we will begin the subject of Ilmu Akhirul Zaman. We then turn now to methodology. And In the same way that the hadith introduces to the fact that there are some signs of Akhir Zaman which are plain and clear, and the other signs which have to be interpreted. We now turn to the Quran. This is Surah Al Imran, and it is verse number 7. And in this ayah of the Quran, Allah speaks about two different kinds of verses in the Quran, confirming what we just said about those two signs of the last day: the lofty tall buildings and the slave woman giving birth to her mistress. The second one is difficult, very difficult, and you need a proper methodology to be able to penetrate number two. Not easy. Similar other verses of the Quran. There you are. There are some verses of the Quran which are plain and clear. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. The month of fasting is Ramadan. There's no two questions, no ifs and buts about that. It's Ramadan, although Habib Bouraqiba in Tunisia wanted to change it from Ramadan. The month of fasting is Ramadan. Okay? The ayah is plain and clear. Most of the verses of the Quran are like that. Plain and clear. And these are Ummul Kitab. This is the foundation of the book. But Allah says that in addition to those ayahs, there are also other verses of the Quran which are mutashabihat, meaning they have to be subjected to ta'weel. They have to be interpreted. And now, remember that the Quran came down to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. He then spoke the words of the Quran, and the scribes would record what he spoke. And after they had recorded it, he didn't say, "Show me what you've written, let me check it out." Fine. He could read. Yeah. So he asked them to read what they had written, and then he confirmed what they had written was correct. So listen carefully. The punctuation did not come from above. We put in the punctuation. The i'rab did not come from above. We put in the fatha and kasra and dhamma. And sometimes the same word with identical spelling, the same spelling, the same word, the same spelling can be pronounced differently with two different meanings. Alright? So be careful. Mutashabihat are those verses of the Quran which have to be subjected to ta'weel. Ta'weel means interpretation. Now, the verse goes on to say that only Allah knows the interpretation. Full stop. And those who are firmly grounded in knowledge, next sentence, they say, everything is from Allah, we have faith in it. My teacher of blessed memory, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Abdul Rahman Ansari, Rahimahullah, responded to say, well, in that case, Here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointing Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam to teach the Quran. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. He's the teacher. And the teacher does not know the meaning of the second set of verses. The teacher only knows the meaning of the ayat which are muhkam, plain and clear. And the teacher does not know the meaning of all the verses of the Quran which are mutashabihah. It doesn't make sense. Why should Allah send down a book and one part of the book only He knows the meaning? It does not make sense. Something is wrong with the punctuation. And so my teacher, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, says, I reject that punctuation. The punctuation did not come from Allah. It's a human word. And the meaning of the verse is that only Allah, and in addition to Allah, those who are firmly grounded in knowledge, only they know the interpretation of the verse. Why do those who are firmly, before we speak about them, Allah warns that these verses which are mutashabihat are going to be used by those who are bent on sowing the seeds of confusion and of misguidance. So beware of them. The ones who can truly interpret these verses are those who are rasikhuna fil ilm, who are firmly grounded in knowledge, because they don't use any arbitrary methodology, hit and miss, cut and paste. No, they use a specific methodology. They say, we believe in the Quran, we believe in the whole Quran. It is from our Lord God, our Rabb. And hence no one can understand the mutashabihat except with reference to the whole book. Except with reference to the whole book. In other words, we're being given the mother of all lessons here. Do not be haphazard. Do not be whimsical. Do not be arbitrary when you seek to understand these verses. Never take a verse of the Quran stand alone. The Americans use this term, stand alone. I could have chosen to spend one day rushing through, like a sightseeing bus stop, rushing through all the parts of Akhir al-Zaman, and you never get a chance to step out of the bus and walk. I chose not to do that. I chose instead to choose on certain parts of the topic. And in this one, to keep you out of the bus for a while, so you can walk around, you can feel the sense of methodology. What is proper methodology? If you are to save yourself from ta'weel, which will be false and wrong and misguided and confusion, Allah teaches methodology at the very beginning of the Quran. He is not deficient in the use of language. No. فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. He is the most learned. And so when He chooses to frame a sentence in the Quran, an ayah in the Quran, pay careful attention. Not only to the content, but to the form. And here He is, subhanahu wa ta'ala, introducing the subject of Adam alayhi salam. And having taught him the nature of all things, He then orders the angels to bow down and make sajda before Adam alayhi salam. The order is given to the angels This is slide number 3. That's right. The order is given to the angels. Bow down or make sajda before Adam alayhi salam. Fasajadu. So they all bow down. In other verses of the Quran, kulluhum ajma'in, all of them bow down and made sajda. Illa Iblis. If you extract this verse of the Quran and seek to understand it without reference to the rest of the Quran, you cannot escape from the logical conclusion that Iblis was an angel. Logically, you will have to conclude that Iblis was an angel. And having done this cut and paste piece of scholarship, you then announce on something called Facebook. I don't know whether you know about it. I've never visited yet, but I'm hearing about it, something called Facebook. And you announce to the public, Iblis was an angel. It's in the Quran. Oh, wait a minute. Allah is teaching you a lesson. You dumb. If you were to go to the rest of the Quran, which is proper methodology, you cannot understand the part without reference to the whole. You will find where, here is Surah Al-Nahl, verse number 50, that angels have no choice. No. When an angel is given a command, an angel must obey. So if you ask your wife to do something and she says she's not going to do it, she's not an angel. Angels must obey. وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They do what they have been ordered to do. If you had studied that verse of the Quran, you would then have understood, oh wait a minute, he disobeyed. So he could not have been an angel. And I've made a fool of myself with my inadequate methodology. And I've declared on Facebook, he's an angel. And now my face is red with embarrassment. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, next one, tells us in Surah Al-Kahf, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. Iblis was jinn. The Christian scholarship wrestled with this problem. And many amongst the Christian scholars came to the conclusion that they don't call him Iblis, I think they call him Lucifer, that he was an angel, but then he fell down, so he became a fallen angel. In order to accommodate the subject in their methodology. This is a case of theological gymnastics. No, you're wrong. You use the wrong methodology. And Allah is teaching us methodology at the very beginning of the Quran. Do not take any verse of the Quran in isolation. Do not take any verse of the Quran by itself to derive meaning and conclusion. Proper methodology is to understand the part with reference to the whole. And so, now fasten your seat belts, put on your thinking cap. But this is perhaps the most important part of the whole day. And so, proper methodology is that you have to go through the Quran to locate all, if I may be forgiven for using the word, all the data in the Quran, which is connected with the subject. And bring all that data together. And since the Quran is non-contradictory, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدَ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Had this Quran come from a source other than from Allah, you would have found in this Quran many instances of contradictions, inconsistencies, internally and externally. But there are no contradictions in the Quran. The totality of the Quran is harmony. So when you have located all the data from the Quran, you have to bring all that data together in a harmonious whole. Integrate it together in a harmonious whole. To integrate all that data into a harmonious whole, you need not only knowledge, you need knowledge, so you've got to do your homework. You've got to do your homework. وَأَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. If you don't plan, you will not read. And more than any other thing, it is in this subject that you got to plan if you want to read. So you've got to do your homework. To seek to integrate all that data from the Quran into a whole which will be a harmonious whole, with no inconsistencies, no contradiction, and that is not an easy task. So don't attempt to run when you do not even as yet know how to read. Be careful. But in addition to that, as every scientist would tell you, all the major discoveries of science are like this. You need something more than the rational effort. Something more than the cerebral effort. You need something called insight. And our chairman is the one who introduced you to insight. This is the third insight. And in this case, spiritual insight. And so the importance of the spiritual quest in Islam. The people who have distinguished themselves all through our history in the pursuit of the spiritual quest chose, I wish they had not done it, chose to give to their discipline the name of tasawwuf or Sufism. If they had not done that, my life would have been so much easier. Yes. It was Dr. Israr Ahmad Rahimahullah in Pakistan who first drew my attention to it. Why did they not stick with the term given by Jibreel alayhi salam, al-ihsan? If they had stuck with al-ihsan, stayed with that term, which is the same as tasawwuf, we wouldn't have all this jihad today against Sufis. It is al-ihsan which delivers insight. So they can establish as many think tanks as they want in Washington or in Jerusalem. The doors of the Quran will forever remain closed to them. They will never be able to penetrate the Quran unless Allah opens the door for them. And that door will be opened with insight. So go down on your musalla and pray and beg for knowledge. Beg for it. Oh Allah, they are asking for this and for that and the other. He wants a Mercedes Benz. He wants the most beautiful woman in the world. And he wants a house lovely as a castle. But this is all I ask for. This is all that I ask. Ask for it, for knowledge. And that knowledge will come to you with insight. And so you're able to bring the totality of the Quran on this particular subject, the totality of the data into an integrated and a harmonious whole. And only then you can now direct attention to the verse of the Quran. Let me see, I think maybe I can do it, we still have some time. Here's an example. I was invited by the Methodist Church in the United States to address a gathering of Methodist ministers from the United States, Canada, and from other parts of the world. Some came from the Arab world. And there were 200 of them in this hall in upstate New York. And I'm invited to address them. I'm probably the only Muslim in the whole hall. And after I gave my talk, they're very polite people, the Americans, ripple of applause. Then one elderly minister held up the Quran in his hand. Yusuf Ali. And incidentally, I forgot to mention, I got Yusuf Ali and I got Muhammad Asad, the two most famous translations in English. And I got them from the publishers at the maximum discount, 30% maximum discount, and I'm passing them on to you at that discount. Okay, so if you want, you can get these copies as soon as you have the first plate. If you don't want to buy them, you can still use them and then put them back, but don't soil them. Check. You mentioned in your talk how Muslims and Christians show respect for each other. And the Quran speaks so highly about Jesus. But what about this verse of the Quran? And then he started to read. And they pinned our silence in the hall. O you who have faith, do not take the Jews, do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. They're friends and allies of each other. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know how to answer. I was fishing. And I gave an answer which didn't convince them. The 200 ministers said. Because I had not as yet applied proper methodology. It is when I applied proper methodology that I suddenly found that there was far more to this verse than you could find in the Tafsir, where they are directing attention to Christians at that time and Jews at that time, this tribe and that tribe and the other tribe. O you who have faith in Allah, do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. Is Allah speaking of all Jews and all Christians? To answer that question, we've got to go to the whole Quran. And when we go to the rest of the Quran, it becomes very quickly, very clear that Allah could not have been speaking about all Jews and all Christians. Proper methodology saved us from the mistake. Proper methodology. We don't have the time to take you through all those verses. But then if Allah is not speaking about all Jews and all Christians, which Jews and which Christians is he speaking about? Now the answer is right there, ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd. Meaning, do not take such Jews, do not take such Christians as your friends and allies, ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd, who themselves are friends and allies of each other. In other words, the Quran is anticipating a moment in time which is to come, when a Jewish-Christian alliance is going to be established. That Jewish-Christian alliance never came into being in Eastern Christianity. No. What used to be Byzantium, what the Quran refers to as Rome, غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم. That Jewish-Christian alliance came into being from Western Christianity, not Eastern Christianity. And that Jewish-Christian alliance gave us Zionism, Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists. And the military arm of that Christian-Jewish alliance is NATO. The fools in Libya, the absolute fools in Libya, didn't know this verse of the Quran. When they entered in alliance with NATO, their argument was, we can take help from anywhere in the world, even from Satan, to achieve our objectives. And they didn't make an alliance with Satan. And look where they ended up. And if you make an alliance with them, وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. You lost your Islam. Here is a verse of the Quran which we can now understand for the first time in a new way. This is not to say that the meanings which were extracted in the tafsir are invalid, but that was not all. That was all. The Quran is saying more. So proper methodology gave us a new way of understanding a verse of the Quran, which prohibits Muslims from making friendship and alliance with the Judeo-Christian alliance, which today controls power in every part of the world except that part where Mr. Putin is in charge. Now then, we proceed. Proper methodology is not only that you take that which has come down from Allah, get the totality of the data, and bring it together as an integrated organic whole, but more than that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed a teacher. And you have to go to the teacher to understand the book. But while the book is protected by Allah, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah protects the book. Allah has not declared that He is going to protect what the teacher has done. So the ahadith are not guaranteed by Allah for their authenticity. The Quran is guaranteed for its authenticity. Well then, how do we use the ahadith? There are those who write off all the ahadith. We are people of the Quran alone. They make a mistake. There are those who, once a hadith is sahih, that's it. No one must ever question a sahih hadith, otherwise you lose your head. That's right. The Quran sits in judgment over the hadith. The Quran sits in judgment over the hadith. I forgot to mention, Dr. Ansari says that in order to bring all the verses of the Quran together in an organized, harmonious whole, you have to locate the common thread which binds them together. That common thread that he calls it the system of meaning. Don't try to translate it into Arabic, I don't think you'll get a translation. The system of meaning which binds it all together. A scientist would understand, because that's how scientific discoveries come. Now then, having located the system of meaning of the subject from the verses of the Quran, now you turn to the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And all the ahadith which are capable of being fitted into that system of meaning will now be added to the database. This is very, very important. All the ahadith which can be harmoniously integrated into that system of meaning will now be added into the database. And what do you do with ahadith, even if they are sahih, which do not fit into this? What do you do? The question is, what do you do when a hadith is in conflict with the Quran? What do you do? The answer is, you stay with the Quran. Is there anyone who wants to challenge that? We'll have enough time later on. You stay with the Quran. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and the hadith is Sahih Bukhari, you know it, and she says that Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam married me when I was 6. Married me when I was 6. I don't know about your part of the world, but in Trinidad, where Nasheed and I come from, when you marry a girl, you can take her home. Once you marry her, you can take her home. She's yours. And more than that, you can close the doors. You can close the windows. And if anyone wants to come inside of the home to take a look, you can then get out. There's private property here. So you can marry a 6-year-old girl and take her home. Close the door, close the windows. The Prophet ﷺ married me when I was 6 and consummated the marriage when I was 9. I'm not particularly concerned with that part. I'm concerned with the marriage part. Is this hadith in conformity with the Quran? Or is it in conflict with the Quran? If I marry a girl in Islam, she has a choice. I have to make a proposal of marriage, and she has to accept or reject, usually through her wali. And if she says no, you better go find somebody else, because she has the right to say no. And if she does not have the right to say no, if she has no choice, the marriage is invalid. The marriage is invalid. Good. If the Prophet ﷺ married her, the implication is that you have a nikah. And in order for a nikah to take place, she must have choice to say yes or no. But when Allah has decreed a matter, you don't have choice. She had no choice. So how can you have a nikah with someone who has no choice? The communication from Allah is she is your wife. Allah has already chosen her as your wife. Implicit in this statement is the marriage is already taking place to Allah. If she is already divinely married to you, how can you have a marriage ceremony here? Once Allah has married you to her, there is no marriage ceremony here. So there is a deficiency of language here. Instead of saying, he married me when I was 6, it should have said, Allah married us. Not he married me, Allah married us. Okay? Once you notice this deficiency in language, it should have been Allah married us, not he married me. You now are alerted to this hadith. Now, marriage means that you have lawful sexual relations. Once you're married, you have lawful sexual relations. Is it permissible to have lawful sexual relations with a girl when she's 6? When she's not as yet reached the age of puberty? When she's not as yet become a woman? Is it permissible for us to have sexual relations with a girl before she becomes a woman? Is that permissible? Yes or no? If you say yes, you're going to have to give us proof from Allah's word. I have avoided in my public lectures this part of the subject. But since we are a small gathering today, I'll give you a verse of the Quran. Allah speaks in the Quran and says about your woman, excuse me, He says, Nisa'ukum harthul lakum. Your women are your fields that you plow. A farmer must plow the fields before he plants the seed. So your women are your fields, implicit in that, fields that you plow. فَأْتُوا حَرْثَكُمْ أَنَّا شِئْتُمْ. So go to your fields, plow your fields, in any way or fashion you wish. The Asbab al-Tanzeel of this ayah of the Quran is that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu had sexual relations with his wife, but not in the missionary form, from on the back. And the Jews declared that if the baby is born, it's going to be squid eye. The matter came before the Prophet ﷺ. And this revelation came down to belie that wrong notion that the Jews have. No, you're entitled to have sexual relations in any mode, in any form, provided that it's the field that is being plowed. Okay? The field becomes a field only when a seed can be planted, and if Allah allows germination, it can germinate. Only then can it be called a field. Can a 6-year-old girl be considered to be a field? That if you plant a seed, the possibility exists that it can fertilize and grow. Answer? No, of course not. Of course not. And so I have come to the conclusion, if others differ with me, they have the right to do so. But they must do it publicly, not in private. That it is not permissible in Islam to have sexual relations with a girl unless or until she has become a field, meaning she has reached the age of puberty. So that if you plant a seed, it has the chance of fertilizing and she can become pregnant. If you marry a girl before that, and you're not allowed to have sexual relations with her, but you are allowed to take her home, are we going to have to install cameras in the home? To ensure you don't do anything with her? Doesn't make sense to me. I know that the Australian government has great concerns about Australian citizens who are pedophiles. I'm not bad talking Australia, I'm talking about the Australian government. If we say that women are allowed, you can marry a girl at age 6 in Islam, every Australian pedophile will want to become Muslim. This is not ungracious language on my part. No. So no Australian should be annoyed with me because the Australian government has enacted legislation on this. We have some Australians here. Yeah. So have they enacted legislation? I believe they have enacted legislation now that you can be prosecuted in Australia. If you go to Indonesia, for example, and do such a thing, you come back home, they can prosecute you in Australia. And so I have come to the conclusion that this hadith is in conflict with the Quran. And so if a case comes before the Sharia court in Egypt, what should the Sharia court do? Here is an Egyptian couple with a 6-year-old daughter. And here's a man who is 55 years old and choose a particularly ugly looking man. Not like Dr. Umar Zaid, his wife is very handsome. And my wife is also doing a good job. So you choose an ugly looking 55-year-old and you have CNN and Al Jazeera there, so captain, and the mother comes before the Egyptian Sharia court. What is the court to do? If you adopt the proper methodology, you would throw out the case. Because this hadith is in conflict with the Quran. But if you adopt the wrong methodology, you will say, since the hadith says that Nabi Muhammad ﷺ married her when she was 6, the implication is that marriage with a girl at the age of 6 is a permissible in Islam. And when that marriage takes place, and CNN and Al Jazeera capture it, it's going to be repeated over and over again on every television station in the world. And we're going to become the laughing stock of the world. That's correct. I met with Dr. Muhammad Mahathir, the former Prime Minister of Israel, maybe 2 months ago. And very strangely, he was very much interested in this subject. Spend most of the time with me talking on this subject. And when I said to him, Dr. Mahathir, we're going to become the laughing stock of the world. He said to me, we are already the laughing stock of the world. One more. Proper methodology and wrong methodology. Because this is crucial to the study of Akhir Zaman. That's why I stopped the bus, so you can get out and walk around a bit. The Quran sits in judgment over the Hadith. Proper methodology. The Hadith, even Sahih Hadith, do not have the same status as the Quran. Proper methodology. If you do not hold on to this, you cannot handle Akhir Zaman. Because I'm warning you, there are fabricated ahadith planted there. And you're going to step on a time bomb. So you will need proper methodology to be able to handle Akhir Zaman. When we arrived in Medina after the Hijrah, we prayed in the direction of Jerusalem. We We turn our backs to Mecca. No Arab could do that and survive. How can you turn your back to the Kaaba and you're an Arab? But we did it. The Jews were stunned. They knew that the Prophet was coming to Medina. That's why they were there in Medina. Come on, Rabbi, don't hide it. That's why you were there. And here he is. But he's not a Jew. He's an Arab. And that stunned them. He is facing Jerusalem and performing his salah. There's evidence as dazzling as the sunshine. This man must be a prophet of Allah. He did more than that. He fasted with the Jews on the days when they fasted and in accordance with the law of fasting in the Torah. No Arab ever fasted like that. From sunset to sunset, no food. That's difficult. From sunset to sunset, no drink. That's difficult. And from sunset to sunset, no wine. That's impossible. Or we fasted like that. When we fasted like that with the Jews on the days when they fasted in accordance with no law of fasting, here's evidence as dazzling as the sunshine. This man could not have been other than a prophet of Allah. So then they made a plan. They made a plan to fix him up. They brought two people who had confessed to zina. O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, you judge the case. He asked, what do you do? They were stunned. They didn't expect that. Oh, we make their faces black and we beat them. Is this the law in your book? Bring your book. Now they're beginning to perspire. Because the plan is, I think it's an Australian word, backfiring. Boomerang. So they brought the Torah. And someone is appointed to recite. And when he came to the verse of Rajab, he put his finger on it. Abdullah bin Salam was their rabbi, taking the Shahada. And he was standing there, he said, raise your finger. Now read. I know you'd like to see this video one day. So he had to recite. Here's the verse of Rajab. In the Torah, the punishment for zina, whether you're married or unmarried, is same law. Is Rajab, stoning to death. So when he recited that verse, then they started to stomach. Well, you know. When the small people committed zina, we had to stone them to death. But when the big men committed zina, we had to get them off. So we had to come up with a solution. So we came up with a solution. We changed the law to the new law. The Prophet ﷺ then ordered the two people to be stoned to death. And they were stoned to death. This was the first time in maybe centuries that the Jews were seeing their law being enforced before their eyes. It had not been enforced for so long. Here was evidence as dazzling as the sunshine. This man is indeed the Prophet of Allah. Allah is waiting. Will you accept it? Yes or no? In the next session, we'll come to this part of the subject. Then they decided to conspire to destroy Islam. And when the evidence was there, plain and clear, so it could be shown to them on Judgment Day, then Allah shut the door to mercy to them. This is the next session. He did a number of things. In the Quran, Allah speaks about it as nasakh, abrogation, cancellation. Number one, he changed the Qibla. When he changed the Qibla, he didn't do it part-time, you know. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that Qibla, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, this Qibla. No. The old Qibla is now cancelled, abrogated, finished. Replaced completely and totally by a new Qibla. The old Qibla was Jerusalem. New Qibla is not Washington. New Qibla is Makkah. The old law of fasting is now cancelled, abrogated. Replaced with a new law of fasting. And we like the new law of fasting. Because dawn to sunset. No food, no drink. And during the night we can go to our wives. So there are smiles in Medina with this new law of fasting. But then, a third naskh. It's there in the Quran. The Quran says one thing, but the Hadith says another. The Quran says that the new law of fasting is a public flogging. The old law is mansukh. Mansukh is not an Arab fellow with a shop here in KL. Mansukh means cancelled, abrogated. The old law is mansukh. It's replaced with a new law. The old law is rajam, stoning to death. The new law is a public flogging. I was in the classroom of tafsir. Maulana Zafrullah was teaching, and he was a very old man, and sometimes he used to fall asleep and sometimes I used to fall asleep. But this day I woke up suddenly because he's dealing with Surah An-Nur, and he says there used to be this verse in the Quran. He's quoting hadith. Umar radiallahu ta'ala is responding. The people are going to say there used to be the verse of Rajam in the Quran, but we no longer see it there. People will say there used to be this verse of Rajam in the Quran, we no longer see it there. So let me explain to you. So I said, one, there used to be a verse in the Quran, no longer dropped out. I couldn't say it in the classroom. This sounds like a load of rubbish. I waited until the class was over, and I went to Dr. Ansari's office. I said, Maulana, this is what they just taught me in the classroom. There used to be a verse of Quran in the verse of Rajam in the Quran, is no longer there. So let me explain to you. If they are unmarried, the Quran is applied. Flogging. But if they are married, the Torah is applied. Rajam. Mawlana Fazl Rahman Ansari rahimahullah said, wrong. Son, they're wrong. No verse of the Quran has ever been cancelled or abrogated. And when I explained this, Dr. Mahathir was so happy. Dr. Mahathir said to me, but that is also my view, that no verse of the Quran was ever cancelled or abrogated. But I am trying to tell this to the ulama in my country, but they wouldn't listen to me. That's what he said to me. And so here you have a situation where the Quran is saying one thing and the Hadith is saying something else, and Sahih Hadith. What do you do? What do you do? If you use the wrong methodology, the Zionists are going to pay two people to come to a Sharia court in Egypt to confess zina. And the court is going to have to pronounce Rajam, because Washington is going to be crying out loud and the New York Times is going to be shouting, and CNN and Al Jazeera, you know, they assisted, the two of them, shouting out loud, why don't you enforce the Sharia? Come on, enforce the Sharia. So you're going to have to enforce Rajam, because that's your methodology. And when you enforce the Rajam, CNN and Al Jazeera are going to capture it. And they're going to play it over and over again ad nauseum in every single television station in the world. And you're going to be more than the laughing stock of the world. Mankind is going to scorn you. Mankind is going to look down upon you. And Israel is going to reap dividends, publicity against Islam. Here is the matter of methodology. No verse of the Quran has been cancelled, none. No verse of the Quran has been abrogated, none. Cancellation and abrogation refers to previous revelations in the previous books, some of which have now been abrogated and replaced with new revelation in the Quran. This brings us to the end of session 1. What I have done is to take you out of the touring bus so you can walk around and feel the sun, feel the earth, on the subject of how important is the subject of Akhirah. Why did Allah send him, Jibreel alayhi salam? Why? As a human being, in this dramatic way. Why? Obviously, it was close to the end of the life of the Prophet alayhi salam. If you do the research, you might be able to convincingly declare that this event took place after the farewell pilgrimage and the Prophet ﷺ returned to Medina. And he now has about 81 days left in his life before he died. We know that this took place late in his life because when the question was asked, what is Islam? He answered one of the things that constitute Islam is Hajj. And he could not have included Hajj until Fath Makkah. Okay? So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send Jibreel alayhi salam in this dramatic way? Why these 5 questions? Why this focus on the Sa'ah and the Alamat to Sa'ah? Why is it that 2 of the signs are given but they are so different from each other? One is plain and clear, Mubin. The other one, you can't touch it without ta'weel, interpretation. And then the Quran itself tells us, the verses of the Quran are like that. Some are muhkamat, plain and clear, but others are mutashabihat. What about this punctuation problem? Are you convinced with the present punctuation that only Allah knows the meaning of the mutashabihat, not even the Messenger of Allah knows the meaning of one part of the Quran? Or do you believe that this punctuation is wrong? And if the rasikhuna fil ilm can understand the verses of the Quran which are mutashabihat, what is the methodology? The totality of the Quran, we believe in all of it. And therefore you cannot understand the part without reference to the whole. And so the methodology is take all the verses of the Quran on that particular subject. And that is not easy. That takes time. And then try to bind them together as an unorganic whole. Non-contradictory, harmonious whole. And to bind them all together as a harmonious whole is not only an intellectual effort, but also requires something called, what is the word? Insight. Yes, this is an insight seminar. Insight. Sharifa is smiling now. Insight. Every scientist knows about insight. It's not sold in the stock market. If Allah puts nur in your heart, you can get insight. But to get that insight, you have to love the Quran. And if you visit the Quran once a year, in Ramadan, and for the rest of the year, you don't have time, you're not going to get the insight. You must recite the Quran cover to cover. And when you finish, you start again. When you finish, start again. And you teach your children. The best way to teach them is to turn off the television. But better than that is to take the television and throw it out. Teach your children to recite the Quran, cover to cover. And when you finish, start again. And when you finish, start again. If you continuously recite the Quran, then the Quran will one day become your teacher. Every time you recite the Quran will teach you something new. Oh, but I've been reciting this verse so many times. I can't remember how many times. But now for the first time I'm seeing something new in it. Insight. If you use the proper methodology, you get a system of meaning. When Dr. Ansari speaks of the system of meaning of the Quran. And then you integrate the hadith, and then you're able to recognize the fabricated hadith. Important, because ilmu akhir zaman has time bounded fabricated hadith. One last word, you can pick up your copies over here, Asad and Yusuf Ali. It's all is also good. But I found to my amazement when I was preparing for this seminar, that there are so many instances in which Muhammad Asad is deficient in his translation and explanation of verses of the Quran pertaining to Akhir. Not simply that Muhammad Asad rejects belief in the return of Jesus alayhi salam, considers him dead. That's not what it is. There are more things in it. So you'd want to take a number of translations and check each. If you are French speaking, we have French speaking here. Muhammad Hamidullah has done a translation of the Quran, and there are other translations of the Quran. This book, Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society, written by my teacher, in 2 volumes, is now being printed. Should be out of the printry in another 2-3 weeks, inshallah, and it will soon be available to you. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم
ذنوبي فإنك غافر الذنب العظيم إلهي لست للفردوس أهلا ولا أقوى على نار الجحيم الله فهب لي توبة واغفر ذنوبي فإنك غافر الذنب العظيم Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Ilahi lastu lil firdausi ahla wala aqwa ala naril jahim. Allah fahab li tawbatan waghfir dhunubi fa innaka ghafiru dhanbil جحيم الله فهب